So I was really fortunate to go with the Holocaust Education Trust to Auschwitz as a BBC journalist some years ago. And I actually went with my Jewish editor, she's Jewish herself. And the experiences that I got were obviously very humbling. It makes you pause and reflect about what happened. But the lesson that I really learned, that I really took away from it, was the one that I think that they were really trying to get across, it's my personal opinion, was when we saw the wall, the collage of different photos, and there were lots of different images of the families, the victims, the families, those that died. But then I also saw pictures of the camp guards and their families on the same wall, and I asked, why are they here? You know, and the answer was because I think we need to understand that the potential for the Holocaust and what happened is within all of us. The guards weren't. If we see the guards as monsters, we're failing in our duty to remember what happened and to not let it happen again. The bottom line is that the ability to commit genocide and to commit these acts of horror that happened at Auschwitz are within each of us. The victims could have been potentially as guilty as the guards themselves. So it's part of the human condition, and to see it as something unique, that those were specific monsters that did this, is to miss the point and to potentially allow it to happen again.
The way in which it went from being simply a work camp to a death camp, and that quite gradual evolution, and I think that tells you something about how careful we need to be about, you know, getting off on the wrong foot. If an idea is deeply flawed, if an ideology is deeply flawed, it might start in a way that isn't obviously lethal or illegal. But if the intellectual underpinning of the idea is flawed, be careful where it might take you.
New generation needs to hear the story of the Holocaust and other atrocities that have happened in human history. Part of that is, is understanding the way that the church and civil society in Germany was taken in by this, and how easily that can happen. And it's learning to recognise the beginnings of dehumanisation and challenging it. I think one specific thing that came out of the Second World War, which has been a good, is the rise of human rights in Europe, and the Convention of Human Rights that in part was a response to the awful events of the Holocaust. I think that attempt to get an agreement on basic standards of morality and a basic respect for humankind and protection for human beings is so important, and I worry a little bit today when I hear some of our politicians and their rhetoric speaking down about human rights, and also a failure to recognise the great achievement in Europe of bringing countries that in the past have been at war, bringing them together and gathering them around an agreement about basic human rights. So there are some dangers even in our own day.
Well, I think it was very important for the Nazi ideology to regard the Jews as, first of all, as mention, as dehuman, in that they were regarded as not being fully human. So that was the starting point. If they were regarded as being fully human, the genocide, the mass murder of them would have been a very traumatic and difficult thing to do. The fact that they didn't regard them as being fully human was an important starting point. So the whole business of robbing the Jews of their citizenship rights, of robbing them of their means of income, and certainly when the Nazis invaded the eastern countries like Poland, locking them up in squalid ghettos where there were starvation rations, where people died more of illness, disease and starvation than of shooting or gassing, where their names were often taken away and they were replaced by numbers, where their heads were shaved to make them look less human than humans, as it were. So it's the starting point was the ideology that Jews were dehuman or unhuman, or whatever the word is, and then once you accept that ideology, crazy though it is, you can then go on to dehumanize them physically.
Well, I think faith does have tremendous power to stir people's emotions and people's will, and so it's capable of bringing some of the very best out of humankind, but also, as you've hinted, it can also lead to some of the worst abuses as well. And so, we see it in the rise of terrorism. The so-called Islamic State, it's hard to know in what sense that really is a religious grouping, or whether it's just a political group that use that sort of energy that religion gives to their own ends. But certainly a case, I think, in any terrorism where it's a very dehumanizing process, isn't it? Where you see innocent people as a means to your political goal. And so the killing of innocent people is a form of dehumanization.
highlight two areas where I think one sees dehumanisation. Firstly, I think some of the mental health, some of the areas where people suffer in their heads in silence, the system, and I speak as a Minister of the Department of Health and within government, it's very difficult to legislate for people's own internal pain and suffering, and I think that's an area where we can, as a society, if we're not careful, be quite dehumanising of people who are experiencing torment, inner torment that isn't visible and isn't easily treatable in obvious kind of health clinics and in our society. Secondly, I think some of our worst examples of the abuse of elderly people in some of our care homes, and we've heard of various horror stories. I think there is something quite dehumanising about the way some of our elderly are treated, and about the way society as a whole can treat lonely, isolated, elderly citizens.
Crimes against the Bosnian Muslims are designed to dehumanise them more than anything else, so that they leave their homes and don't go back. So examples of that are torture, people being rounded up and put in properties like old schools and army barracks and being tortured by people who used to be their neighbours, and then sexual assaults and taunting, people being taunted by music, being woken up, being captured and put in these camps and then being made fun of and scared, and old pop videos being used to kind of make fun of people. So a lot of it's what you might call a kind of psychological torture, which has the effect of destroying people's confidence. It doesn't break them as a community, which I think was the aim, but certainly a lot of it is deliberately anti-Islamic. And I think one of the paradoxes of the Bosnian War was it made people feel more Muslim. They actually went to the other extreme. They became more religious because they were attacked on the grounds of their religious faith.
dehumanization is in the media, isn't it? It's around us everywhere. You often hear people talking about illegal asylum seekers and bogus asylum seekers, and you know how awful it is that we're being swamped by migrants. I mean, all this language stems from the way that people are talked about in the media and by politicians, and I think that it's very, very dangerous language because it makes people read it and hear other people using that language think, oh, we're not talking about humans like us, we're talking about some strange species that's not quite human, that's dangerous to us, that's the language of plagues. I mean, quite often it's quite biblical in its sort of threats.
It's actually about taking the time out and questioning your motivations and why you think certain ways about certain people if you find yourself doing that. So questioning stereotypes, questioning boxes that people put people in.
And I think it's very important to have laws in place, not so people are scared and they're always worried about being arrested, not that kind of police state thing, but that people feel the structures are strong enough to protect them. I mean, you'll always have violence. I don't think you can eliminate it entirely. You'll always have prejudice. There'll always be some group, and it'll shift. If it's not Muslims or Christians, it will shift to another category. I don't think you can get rid of that because it's part of human nature to divide and subdivide and divide again. However, if you have robust laws and a judiciary which isn't part of the state, then you have at least some protection.
We're all human. I mean, the ways in which we're similar are so much greater than the ways in which we're different. I don't understand this sort of focusing in on the minute differences between us. We all care about our families. We all care about being safe, living somewhere nice, having enough food to eat, being free, being educated. Those are the things that are important to everybody. The fact that some people have brown eyes and some people have blue eyes, some people have light-coloured skin, some people have dark-coloured skin. Who cares? It's what's inside that matters.
possible to